Well, welcome back into the mid-Norfolk farm garden. Weather's finally got warm here in Norfolk and the garden really hasn't been used as much as we would normally do during a summer season. It's looking quite end of seasonish. A lot of the first flush of the roses now by middle of July here in the UK have had their main flush of flowers for the year. The old ramblers on the wire and wooden arch at the back of this border still just coming to the end of their flowering sessions. Got a lovely combination of old-fashioned roses that just ramble through. Starts with American Pillar and ends with a variety of different ones. Dorothy Perkins, Blush Rambler, there's all sorts in there, many of which have been in situ for probably 60 or 70 years now. The new rose garden has a combination of different modern and old-fashioned roses in it, but as I said, most of those now have had their first flush. It's important to try and get in there and deadhead to try and encourage some new growth to come. A lot of them do form hips, but they'll all benefit from a little bit of a chop back at this time of year to try and encourage that second flush to come. The verbena has been really successful this year. It's seeded profusely all over this gravel garden. Let me show you some of those. Yeah, this is a patch of seedlings from that verbena just coming up. Gravel seems to be an ideal way of these self-seeding themselves. Each one of these is an individual little plant which will grow on to a multi-stemmed plant, and within a season, and certainly next season, these overwinter quite well here, they'll give you this fantastic profusion of very open stems with this lovely flower heads held up between 4 and 6 feet. This one's right up at my head level, and we've tried to encourage these throughout the mid-section of this border to try and give us that little burst of colour, because these will go on flowering right the way through the late summer and give you that burst. Some loosestrife coming up in the middle there. We've bought a couple of new loosestrifes to try and encourage that. There's one round the back which I'm particularly fond of. I'm going to walk around and show you that one now. The old bench still hasn't made it down to the vegetable garden. Needs a bit of care, that. The new one that we've bought this season we're very pleased with. Nice bright antique piece of really beautifully moulded cast iron. That's absolutely gorgeous. Weighs an absolute ton. It's a 2-man lift, that. Where is that loosestrife? There she is. Particularly love the colour on this one. Let's look at it with the evening sunshine just coming through. A really nice cerise pink version. I don't know the variety. I don't know whether it was ever labelled. I think this was bought at an open gardens that they were selling plants that they propagated themselves, so they probably didn't know the variety, but I'm going to try and divide that if we can. Loosestrife can be divided once it's formed a good crown. We'll seed, but it doesn't seed particularly well or profusely in our soils here, that we are awash with young seedlings around the base of these. So I think division's the way forward to try and propagate that one, because it's a real fantastic colour combination. Sedums looking very good at this time of year. They form this lovely low hedge with this sort of lime green at this time, and they'll only start colouring up towards the end of August into their full autumn plumage of russet reds. My lemon trees have been struggling this season. As you can see, we've got a good flush of new growth on them now. Still some old season lemons which really should have been picked by now and starting to brown off. But this new growth, as you can see, is prone to some aphid infestation on the fresh lung growth, but at least I'm not overrun with scale insects on these, and that was why I bought them out as early as I did. A little bit of dieback on these, but we are really fighting the elements trying to grow lemons in even the southern UK. We do take them into a conservatory to protect them over winter, and they struggle on but perform every year. And some good blossom coming on this one, which looks to have set. Young fruit there just coming on. So I've got them in decent sized pots. We need to make sure we remember to feed those throughout the summer to try and encourage that fresh young growth and blossom. Hollyhocks, difficult season for hollyhocks this year. If you can hear the jackdaws, we've got absolute swarms of them here this year. They've all fledged about a month ago, and they form big flocks before they move on to new territories. Back to the hollyhocks, so I mean, I shouldn't really complain. 2 plants here with that two-tone combination working really well. We had such a damp and mild winter that the rust on the young plants and crowns earlier in the season was really quite extensive, and you can see that they've lost almost the entire first crown at the base here, bare stems right the way down to the ground. Won't do them any harm, as you can see. Sufficient growth and leaf production further up to give these lovely spires of really profuse, good sized blossoms, and we'll hopefully let those continue on and seed. They will continue to flower from the base upwards towards the tips, which are the last flowers to open. We don't have to support them here at all, even in this quite exposed position. It's exposed, it's against the back of this old greenhouse wall, so it's not as open to the elements as a lot of the hollyhocks we grow here, but because they have such a deep taproot, if you're growing them in hard, uncultivated soil as this is, that's going through a base of hardcore into a uncultivated subsoil, and that will quite happily support these hollyhocks heads even up to around 7 or 8 foot perfectly adequately throughout the season, even in windy conditions. Foxglove's just about finished now, but they are producing, hopefully. Yeah, look at that. Absolute masses of seed. We don't actually physically sow any in this border, we just let them come up where the seed falls, and it blows around. Being so tiny, it tends to be wind scattered very, very well. It's got a teasel in here, which I absolutely hate, but structurally you can't knock them. Again, self-supporting but vicious things. Again, if you're not watching those, you will have dozens of them around the base this time next year. They do seed quite profusely. It's looking very good, but first blast of colour we had in here is now faded. As I say, a little bit end of seasoning, a really good time. The geranium should have really been cut back by now. We're well past Chelsea, and the Chelsea chop is a sort of timing that we tend to traditionally use, but this has been such a strange season. They're still flowering away really well, and I can't bring myself to give them that really profuse chop which would tidy this border up and encourage fresh growth, which will flower again later in the season. I think they're just naturally going to do that themselves, but they are producing an awful lot of seed, which again gives us opportunities like this. Little plants, gravel's such a great seed bed, isn't it? Again, these can be pricked out, moved on, can grow them on till you can see what the flowers are. They're not all going to be the big flowered variety. Just look at this little one, tiny little flowers. Is that worth keeping or not? Well, when you've got so many of them, tendency is to just prick out the very best and keep those. Yes, it's a ladder, I know. We've still got the builders here, and top window's going to be replaced sometime over the next month. In the meantime, I need to get a platform up and do a little bit of opportunity painting on that mid-floor window, which doesn't look too high, but when you're up a ladder on a big Georgian sash like that, I prefer to be on a platform than waving about precariously with a paintbrush and paint pot. These oxeye daisies again formed some fantastic seed. This is now ready for collecting or spreading. Just look at that. It's the little grey seeds at the end of these little pods that are the seeds, and they can be collected and dried. You do need to make sure that they're completely dried off before storage. But again, these spread profusely out. There's a little plant coming up there, and a slightly older one just here. But if you have a look at the base of these plants now, ideal opportunity to take some of these older flowering heads off. It's already starting to put some fresh buds up, but you can see the crown at the base. If you can't or don't have the time to cut around these little flowers that are coming up, if you just cut the whole thing down to that fresh new growth or crown at the base. These will come back and give you a shorter but very good and heavy flowering in about 6 weeks' time. Now these shouldn't be flowering at all at this time of year. They really should be at their best later in August through to September, but again, funny old season, and they're coming into flower really well and are going to give us a blast of colour. I think it's a combination of the wet summer we've had and the cooler temperatures earlier in the spring that's really confused these plants as to where they are in the season. But as long as it stays warm and wet, and that's key for these because they do tend to not enjoy drought, it will give us a lovely flush of these bright yellow sunflower-like flowers throughout the next 5 to 6 weeks. And again, Japanese anemones looking really good. I filmed the ones over at Gardener's Cottage earlier in the week, and they are looking just as good. Last year hardly did anything. They really hated the drought and really hot temperatures, and it does like a sort of semi-shade to grow in. These are running forward as well by those root runners. They do tend to sort of spread out if they're happy and growing well. But again, this one's going to give us a really fine profusion. Just look at the amount of buds we've got on this. That's a single, nice darkish pink, this one. Held really well. And again, I do love the architectural form of these as much as the flowers, with the way you get these purple, greeny purple stems that split into these foliate leaf splays, and then the flower buds and heads held well above them. Really nice plant to grow, and some lovely varieties available now. Whites, doubles, this dark pink I particularly like. No scent to them, so purely decorative. Don't know if they make a good cut flower. We've never cut them, brought them indoors. Don't think they last particularly well, and because the way they flower with these buds opening over a long period of time, it's not like they all come to maturity at one time that then make a good cut stem. Now, I couldn't not show you one of my hostas, which again this year we've struggled with the hostas. The wet has been so good for the slugs, and anybody that's grown anything that is prone to slugs will agree with me there. It's been a difficult season, but these are still flowered really well. This particular one we grow quite a lot of, and it's one of the best flowering hostas. Here it is again in another pot, and I know you're going to say, please tell us the variety, because we'd love to grow that. And I wish I could, but I don't know the name of this one. It's one that we just found growing in the garden, and that's the reason why it's not one that we bought from a garden centre as a name variety. If anybody can help us out with this, it's a quite thick-leafed, waxy-leafed, small-leaf variety. That's quite characteristic of the leaf. Spreads very well and has these really profuse and multiple heads of this mauve multi-stem flowers that come up in profusion from the crowns every year. Really good pot-grown hosta, and one to grow for the flowers just as much as for the foliage. I'm trying to build up a collection of pot-grown figs because I've lost the large, mature and very productive plant that we had on the front of the old stable barns due to the building work we've done here. I have saved it. It's not gone completely. That large pot-grown variety there is a rooted stem that we got off it, and we've got 2 of those growing. But I've also, not knowing what that variety is, it's a green fig with a purple, beautiful, sweet flesh. But I've got a Rouge de Bordeaux, which is most definitely a different leaf shape, so I don't think our original one is a Rouge de Bordeaux. And this is the old traditional brown turkey, which again doesn't really match on the leaf shape or size, or we will see. But I'm going to try and grow these on. Figs will grow very well in pots here in the UK. Don't need any overwinter protection. We get 1 crop of figs per year which ripen in late July. This year I'm going to get the grand total of 2 if I'm lucky. That one there, and its counterbalance weight mate over there. Everything else browned off over winter. We've got a profusion of young growth coming up through here. It's doing okay, but it's going to be a while before we've got more figs than I'm happy to eat in a sitting. I do like figs, and I'm hoping to get a variety of different sizes, shapes and tastes by putting a small collection together. I'll gradually increase the size of these pots. I'm just going to grow them on in there for a few years. They'll let me know when they're ready for repotting. They'll be coming through the base, even though I've got stones in the bottom. So the sun's setting here in Norfolk, as you can see. Been a gorgeous day, one of the best we've had so far this year, the first one that's really felt like summer. Lots of jobs to be cracking on with in this garden. The old vegetable garden's still looking very lush. The Ethel rose, which was so beautiful this year, just browned off now and ready for deadheading. We'll start tying some of these very vicious new growth spurs in for next year's flowering season. Got a little bit of evening primrose coming up in this mix with some alstroemeria. Again, the main colour bursts in this border now, the end of the roses. Got that flowering sorrel just behind this rose stem, and the largest hollyhock I think I've ever grown. Don't think this is going to film particularly well in this light, but it's at least 9 foot, that beauty. Bare at the base, about 2 inches in diameter. Why it's gone so tall in this variety and area, I don't know. Maybe it's been fighting for the light, because certainly it's well shielded on the sunny aspect. But this little flower garden on the back of the new barn's looking very well. We're going to let these foxglove seeds, part of the cottage garden maintenance, is not being too tidy too quickly and letting all this seed do its thing for next season. I do like these crocosmia, and I can tell you the variety of that. This is Fireglow, always the best and most reliable. Gives that strong burst of colour at this time of year, which is so useful in late autumn. Doesn't really go with the magenta underlying it, but the silver foliage certainly helps pick it up. And coming through that variety of Caucasian scabious, I think, and a daisy. Coming through my lupins, or hollyhocks, feverfew, roses, cicericium, daylilies, and the old blackcurrants. Didn't get a single berry off those this year. Squirrels had the whole lot. Anyway, thanks for watching.